Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have two very special guests. If you've been watching my show recently, one may be recognizable to you. He was on my show a couple weeks ago. His name is Sean Oliver, and we covered a book titled Killing the Lieutenant, Fighting Miami's Cocaine Wars, Hunting Griselda Blanco, in My Fight to Stay Alive. And that also included a former police officer, Lieutenant Raul J. Diaz, D-I-A-Z. And when I was looking at that, I remember another book had come out. It had come to my attention. A lot of stuff pops across my kind of field of vision from Amazon or other people's interviews. And it was a book I was interested at first glance. And the title of the book, which we're going to discuss today, is another of Sean's authorship. And if you're watching this on my 6 channels, you'll see the book cover. The full title is Monkey Morales, The True Story of a Mythic Cuban Exile Assassin, CIA operative, FBI informant, smuggler, and dad. And we're lucky enough to have his son, and of the same name, Ricardo Morales, but Jr. And this is a different family than maybe people know from JFK lore. David Morales, that's a different guy. Same era, easily to get confused, but David Morales was from Mexico, and Ricardo's from Cuba. And I was talking to Raul Diaz. I had a woman on my she's a great historian. Her name is Ada Ferrar, and she wrote a book. I had her on. She won the Pulitzer Prize after I had her on. Yeah. I'm taking credit for it.
Sure.
But she wrote a book.
Well, I hope we catch up to her thanks to you also, because I keep staring at her being number one for forever on the.
It's a great book. Like this book, it's very readable history, and this is a history book in a sense too. It's a biography and a history of Monkey Morales, but also the way she writes is very approachable. It's not kind of the staid, boring prose type stuff. So I commend her for writing that book. But that title is Cuba, An American History, which is an interesting statement because Cuba is kind of seen as its own kind of separate country, but so much of its history is American, and much like Monkey Morales and some of these other anti-Castro Cubans who made it to Miami, their story really is part of the American story coming from Cuba, and the attachments there for better or worse. And there's a lot of questions about that. We're going to look into that as like the life of Monkey Morales and these really they're almost like modern adventures in a lot of ways. How you judge them is really up to you. But I'm glad to have both of them on board. So Sean Oliver and Ricardo or Rick Morales Jr., welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
For people who didn't, we talked about the Killing of the Lieutenant, and you mentioned Diaz in this book, Monkey Morales. Maybe a good part to start, Sean, is how this is the book you wrote before Killing the Lieutenant, if I remember correctly. Maybe you can talk about how the connections took place and how the beginnings of Monkey Morales started the book.
Well, let's flash back. Is it 6? No, it's probably 7 years now, Rick, right? 7?
Yeah, right before the pandemic. Yep.
Right before the pandemic, yeah. I was reading a book called Hotel Scarface, where Monkey Morales was mentioned. He's one of several characters, just the profile of a location in Coconut Grove that was kind of a beehive of a lot of the influential people in the Miami underworld and some of the overworld as well. But Monkey, I found to be the most interesting character profiled. And so I contacted Rick on Twitter, X, and best place to find Rick, by the way, if anyone would like to reach out. And I saw he'd left a 4 monkey head review of an interview I did about that book on my podcast at the time, and the name was Ricardo Morales. So I had to DM him, and I said, "Listen, this can't be coincidence, right? You have to be related." And he said, "He's my dad." And I was like, "My God!" So we started talking. I couldn't believe no one had done anything just about Monkey. He's in literature and in filmed entertainment in a cursory way, but nobody took the time to do his story. So I said to Rick, I said, if it's okay with you, give me a year of your life which turned into 6. But we'll do this, and we tried to do it for television first. Got very complicated. Pandemic was a very big part of why you couldn't do anything for that time and a couple of years afterwards because of everything that was in the hopper when it happened. And also, it's the breadth of the story. It's 3 continents, 20 years. It's a period piece. There's a friggin' war in the Congo. It's a lot to ask somebody to film. So they optioned us like 5 or 6 times, counting renewals, and nobody could get it across the finish line. And so after Rob Reiner actually passed on us, Rick was a guest on Rob Reiner and Soledad O'Brien's show, Who Killed JFK. He said, "My God, this is a film," and we're like, "Yeah, it is." And,
during the recording of the podcast,
Yeah.
Who Killed JFK by Rob Reiner, I was laying out my dad's life story for him chronologically, and midway through, he's like, "But this is a movie. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You're a movie maker. I'm just sitting here waiting for you to say, let's make a movie." And then, unfortunately, he ends up being murdered, and it just horrible situation. But yeah, every time we got close, something would come up and derail the plans. So I had mentioned a few times to him, and we had discussed, you write books, and maybe we should just do the book first, let that hit the atmosphere, and hopefully from that we'll get some feedback. And right now it's moving along at a decent clip, and so hopefully in the near future we can say something positive about that situation. But
we're with the right creative team now, I think. I think that's the thing. We're with the right people now.
Yeah, I spoke to Sean. This story lay dormant. Sean kind of alluded to it. For so many years, nobody had done this story because nobody in the family wanted to do this story. We had all scattered to the 4 corners of the earth after my dad's death. It splintered the whole family, and nobody really wanted to say, "Hey, this is my dad's life story." I was married with kids. I didn't want to glamorize it for my children. I moved to Michigan to get away from that lifestyle, which is explained in the book. And so I never even told my children. My kids were out of high school when Hotel Scarface comes out, and they see a tweet about it, and they see their grandfather's picture on Twitter, Triple Agent, Monkey Morales book coming out, and they're like, "Who?" And then I have to explain my entire life growing up in Miami, my father's life growing up. So it wasn't something that I, for one, was proud of because of some of the bad things that happened during my dad's life that he had done, and I was trying to hide it. So once it exploded with Hotel Scarface, and then Sean did a podcast with the author Robin Farzad of Hotel Scarface, then I said, well, if anybody's going to tell the story, it might as well be me, so you can get it from the horse's mouth, as per se. And Sean was magnificent in the interview of Robin, and was so into the subject matter that he took it as like his mission to make sure that it got done properly, and he did a fantastic job. But that's how the nucleus of the story, basically getting done and put on paper, happens.
My reticence, William, to do it as a book was more than once. Rick was like, "Come on, they're having a hard time with the film. Let's just get it out there." And he was right, of course. And I should have done it 6 years ago, before that probably. But there was so much buried under years, buried under history, buried under redaction and documents. We had to do a lot of the connecting the dots when we were writing it in script form. But you are always saved, William, by the glorious based on a true story in filmed entertainment, and you can, there's carte blanche after that. And in publishing, though, as you know, you can't do that. It's not acceptable. So I needed to cite everything, and I had to find anything that we extrapolated. Now I had to find documentation for. So I knew it was going to be Herculean. I don't know the final count on the footnotes. I think it's 675 footnotes at the end of the book. For two reasons. Number one, it was well researched by us, and I was proud of that, but also it reads so fantastically. It would be very easy for someone to say, this is a load of crap. How did one person, and I wanted to put the proof and the documentation of everything we uncovered about his life through documentation, through interviews of people who are still alive. There were still some people we were able to talk to, and family.
Right. And I think that's an important component of this book is it's a true history. You really did footnote everything. So he's a historical figure, maybe not as well known as maybe other people from around that era, but he knew a lot of people that the public knows, Orlando Bosch, and being around just Castro and all of these exiles, they were an important, a lot of people may not know this, but a lot of those guys were, and you relate this in the book, and the actual Ricardo Morales Sr. said this, is that he was he received the best training available. So a lot of these guys were very well trained in a variety of different skill sets that they acquired after exile, right? So
yeah. So my father, when Castro takes over, he was already a G2 agent in Cuba, which is government agent level, like FBI type, secret police type. So at some point, he's been trained already. When he was younger, the Jesuits put him in a special program in the military because he had special attributes that they could see, they recognized, which was he had eidetic, photographic, you want to call it what you want to call it, type memory, but he could read things and remember them. So he could read like a manual on how to operate a machine gun, and after reading it, he could take it apart, put it back together, and use it. He memorized everything. With Lieutenant Diaz, they would go on drive-alongs, and he would write down 40 license plates, and he could read them back and forth to him afterwards with all the license plates. So he had this photographic memory. So they stuck him in a Jesuit school, military school, to get him advanced training. So by the time he was a G2 agent at the age of 19 years old in Cuba, he was already very well trained in certain things. And Castro,
three languages too, right? So Spanish, English,
and possibly four more that you could understand, because once you're in that Latin space of Italian, French, and Spanish, you can also talk in multiple other languages because you know the words. They're derived from basically the same words. So he's working, and he stays in Cuba after Castro takes power, but at some point finds out that they're going to kill him, that they've turned on him and his brother, and they're coming after him because his father, my grandfather, had worked for the Batista government as a federal judge. So his name, the Morales name, was basically on the list. At some point they were going to get to it. So he finds out, the guy comes to get him, he kills the guy, they make it to the Brazilian embassy, and he hides out there for 90 some days. I can't remember the number. 82 days in the Brazilian embassy till the deal is worked out where he can be taken out of the country. So by the time he arrives in Miami, he's already.
Sorry to interrupt, Rick, but he was actually one of the people against Batista at the time. So a lot of people think that these people are all pro Batista. What happens is Castro gets into power, and then they're like, "Wow."
Correct. They're anti-Batista. They're fighting Batista along with the Castro people. Castro takes over, and they're waiting to see what Castro's move is going to be. And then they realize Castro's move is going to be another dictatorship with whoever funds him financially. And at that point, communism and socialism isn't even in play yet. They're not even discussing that. They're discussing how do we take over and become dictators. And they're expecting to become a dictatorship followed by the United States of America. But when they take over all the property from all the Americans and say the property now belongs to Cuba, the U.S. cuts off Cuba. So then the Soviets, he says, well, I don't need the U.S. money. I'll take the Soviets' money. And then he becomes communist in name only. It's always been a dictatorship that starves the population. You can name it with any ism: socialism, communism, capitalism. But what you have in Cuba is a dictatorship. A man took over, consolidated power, and just received money from whoever would give him the money. So my dad escapes, and by the time he makes it to Miami, he's already known about, he has connections, and he starts immediately working for anti-Castro groups, trying to battle wherever they can against Cuban influence and any countries that were still trying to make business with Cuba, and finds himself in a situation where it's beneficial to him to start working for law enforcement. And
so he stayed in his career. He basically stayed in that career coming from G2, a very bright guy, son of a judge too. So
yeah, federal judge.
Was he, if I remember correctly, was he in law school at the time? Because I think Castro was a law student, or he was a lawyer too, right?
Castro was a lawyer. He had gone to law school. He had been arrested and then released during the when they were trying to take over. But he was a lawyer.
Yeah, it's a remarkable guy. And I think you wrote, Sean, in your book that the people, the exiles post Castro, were in the hundreds of thousands, right? It was like 600,000 or 700,000 fled. Does that sound like a right number?
Yeah, I always kind of look at the exile story of Cuba in two sections. The Mariel boat lift of 1980 is the one that's oft cited in discussions of crime and drugs, because what started as a wholesome outreach by the Carter administration to allow Cubans, if you could get here, you could stay here, and they projected 3,500 and were prepared for about that many. And Castro, of course, uses this as an opportunity to flush his system of anyone he deemed undesirable or escortia, trash, in his words. So he empties the prisons, the asylums. Anyone deemed unworthy of society is sent to Mariel. They're loaded on boats. I mean, this was an opportunity for people who did exile here after Castro's in 61, 62, 63, to now get grandma out, But the problem was the docks were also loaded with, people talking to themselves and people with long criminal histories, and they were just kind of packed on the same boats. So that 3,500 that we expected and could handle becomes 125,000 when after 8 months, Carter cuts that off. And but a lot of the damage was done. Miami couldn't handle that influx in one shot. What happened to the schools, the public school systems, the crime statistics that are in the book about how many Cubans that were incarcerated were Mariel and pre-Mariel. There's a huge disparity.
In the original Cuba, in the original revolution, about 200,000 Batistas leave the island right at the get-go. So you have a mass exodus of 200,000 Batista loyalists, blah, 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 that leave the island, go to Miami, set up camp, and they pretend like they even care about going back, but they're really already setting roots in Miami. They know that it'll be a long time before, even though you have the ones that never gave up, that became the soldiers that volunteered for the Bay of Pigs, because as soon as they arrive, they start, well, we're going to build something to go back, to Cuba with the government. But at that point, my dad had already been moved into what's called Op 40, Team Op 40, which they were the specialized group of people that were going to be going in to sabotage things, logistics, intelligence, and whatnot. So that group was ready to go in, but they weren't going into the second wave of the Bay of Pigs. So they never got to go onto the island during the Bay of Pigs. But you have that difference. You have 200,000 Batistas that are in Miami. And then in the 80s, you get all the Mariels that come in. They don't care for each other because the Batista people feel that the ones that are coming now are the reason they got kicked out in the first place because they were freed. They were the slaves that were freed by Castro. With all the bad things that Castro did, it was just that he pretended to be a good guy by freeing the poor, but then he didn't take care of the poor. So you free them, but you don't take care of them. You take all the land for the government, you make all the money, and you keep all the money. That's what Castro did to Cuba. He just decimated the people, let the people starve, and kept all the money, like a dictator would.
He's rumored to have like offshore accounts in the billions. Like that's the rumor.
They have $18 billion. It was found not too long ago in an offshore account that the military controls. They're just waiting for the day they get overthrown to hop on the choppers and leave, and they got $18 billion stashed somewhere. That's what they're waiting for now with Trump being so aggressive on it. They're just trying to figure out how to get all the money they can before they have to run for their lives. Because there's no way they can stay there.
There are people like YouTubers who go through Cuba today, and it looks like a third world country, if that. I mean,
I go fourth at this point.
Oh, fourth, yeah. I mean,
I don't even think third because we're approaching second. So
we sure. But it's interesting. So the exiles, there's the Batistas, then there are the people who leave after Castro comes to power, and this whole ferment in South Florida really changes the area too, right? So you have. Can you talk about
you have groups that used to be there battling and killing for a revolution, and now you have an influx of people that are battling and killing to make money and survive and get rich. They're never going. It's not like they care about the island. They just got off the island, and they have no workable skills to take jobs. So the immediate job in Miami is cocaine and marijuana, and that's easy to get into. So that is what ignites the cocaine cowboys era in Miami. It's just
the late 70s. When did it really take off in Miami? When do you think?
Well, let's see. I would say 78, 79, 80, 81, and then from there it just keeps going bigger and bigger every year. But the late 70s is where it starts cranking up. It used to be marijuana, 70s. Then marijuana became disliked because of its bulk. It had to be bulky. My dad was once arrested for driving with like 4,000 pounds of marijuana at some point. He got off of that, beat it in court because, of course, he has connections with the CIA and all that. But the first thing he said after that arrest was, I'm never selling pot again. Too bulky, not enough profit. Cocaine, much smaller, much more profitable. What's the point of smuggling marijuana? So that was the thing. The cocaine just exploded when imagine having connections in Colombia and you've got money and you've got all these Cubans standing around doing nothing on the streets of Miami looking how to make money. I can hire 20 of them for $500, put them on boats, send them out to meet the mother boat, load them up, bring them back, and they're happy with $500. Meanwhile, you made $5 million. So each run back then was between $5,000 and $1,000 per person on the boat. That's all they're getting paid. You send 10 of them out and they're bringing you millions. So there'd be 20, 30 scarab boats in the water meeting these boats out there. And my dad had all the DEA codes, all the FBI codes, knew where all the patrol boats were from all his contacts and all the information. He had all the radio equipment. He was their secret agent helping them run their organization because he had the flight patterns for the planes. He knew where to come in and out. Just like when you watch that movie American Made by Tom Cruise, that the CIA is paying for everything. The CIA is giving them the flight numbers. Here's where the DEA planes are. Go through here. That's how it was for them in the early stages of the early 80s. That's until when the Colombians come into Miami and take over the business actually in Miami, then everything changes because they kill everybody. If you look before the Colombians took over Miami, the Cubans would never kill anybody except the person they were looking for. So like if you ripped them off, they would find you and kill you. But if a Colombian gets ripped off, he would go and kill your whole family. So that's when the city goes wild with murders and the cocaine.
It's reflected in Scarface too, right? The confrontation between the Cubans.
Yeah.
Scarface is Cuban, or Tony Montana and the Colombians. But your dad, he was kind of like a modern mercenary in a lot of ways, because not only was he a smuggler, he had the train. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but he was sent to the Congo after Lumumba. Like, it's really kind of that aspect.
Yeah. Before he goes into the drug business is his last hurrah. He has nothing left in life. But before that, he's working in Miami for Cuban Power, trying to help the revolution against Castro. Then from there, he is sent to the Congo, where I'm going to let Sean tell the story of the Congo as he says it beautifully. But the CIA sent an Op 40 team to the Congo to help fight the Cubans that were in the Congo that Castro had sent. And I defer to Sean for the rest of the story.
Yeah, Morales was a standout soldier for the CIA, and all the paperwork that we got our hands on that are replicated in the book talk about how he's kind of a natural leader and recommended for future missions. So what happens is Bay of Pigs happens. Operation 40 tries to get in there a few more times. There's a pretty spectacular story detailed in the book about their attempt on a refinery, where 8 of them are in small boats, motorboats, fast boats, going to hit the refinery, and a giant frigate is out on the water because Castro decided to go fishing early that morning and had the military take him out, and they happen upon the Cubans, and there's a whole shootout. And so there's some of those attempts, but he's then sent to at the time, the Belgian Congo, to fight the Simba rebels, who were getting support from Russia and also from Castro. So he and his squad, led by Rip Robertson of the CIA, are sent in as specialists. This is the Operation 40 team now. And they're going to, there's a mission house. Now, Stanleyville has been captured by the rebels, but there's a mission house, and the Cubans were late. The Op 40 were late getting into the Stanleyville for the Stanleyville raid to free the hostages in Stanleyville, because they were coming in on jeeps, whereas the other support had air cover, and so they went and did that. So it's reported that there's a house of missionaries, Westerners, held hostage by the Simba rebels, about 11 miles outside of Stanleyville. Would anyone go in on that mission? And the Op 40 Cubans and Rip were the ones that said, yeah, we'll do it. So they drive in, and they're taking fire the entire time on the jeeps. Morales takes one in the back on the way in, and they get in there. They do free the hostages in there, but he took a large personal toll in that mission and his entire time there, because of the type of carnage that they were seeing. These Simba rebels who believed in voodoo and witch doctors, and the mutilation of the bodies that they were coming upon was not your typical warfare in the jungles and in the villages. And he carried that for a long time, and it surfaced. It surfaced later in life too, in the era we were talking about, when he was working for the Cuban entrepreneurs of New Miami, when he had access to the cocaine and Valium, and he was drinking more, largely to stem the nightmares that he was having from
PTSD.
Time. Yeah, PTSD.
Yeah. So, but when he gets back from the Congo, he's in between there's really nothing going on with Cuba yet. There's like talk. So he's waiting for something to happen there. And he gets a job offer because somebody messes up a bombing for Lefty Rosenthal, the famous mafia member. He then is recommended to Lefty Rosenthal as the best bomber in Miami for you to hire to work for you. So Luis Posadas, who works for the CIA very famously and eventually comes back around, and my dad and him hook up again after this, but recommends him for to Lefty, and he begins working for Lefty as Lefty's personal bomber, doing work for Lefty Rosenthal while he waits for the CIA to come up with a plan for Cuba for the next attempt on what they're going to do with Cuba. So there's a thing called the Bookie Wars, where their bookies are taking bets without permission from the higher ups, and he bombs the place for Lefty to send a message. Every time it's blow up the place, no casualties. So they go, they inspect the place. This is where I'll put the bomb. It'll knock down this wall, but nobody will die. Just to send messages, so nobody ever died. But that got out of hand with some police officers being targeted without their knowing. So my dad wasn't happy with working for him because they were targeting police officers, and other police officers were bombing other police officers' places. And it got out of control to the point where the newspaper had a box score, like you keep in baseball, bomb number 1 location, box number 2, and it was going into the 40s and 50s already too. So it was a bad time in Miami, and Dad was one of the main instigators in there, but he was working for Lefty Rosenthal at that time. So
right, yeah, Rosenthal's depicted in Casino, right? That's the
Robert De Niro character.
Yeah.
An important distinction, William, with this is the only time outside of the very end of his life where he has to take working for the drug smugglers, but this is the only time where his involvement in something criminal is for pay and not for mission. All of the other stuff, the Cuban bombing groups, his working with Bosch, when Bosch forms MIRR and Cuban Power and all the other names that he used, those were all an extension of the mission they were promised by our government. So to their mind, when that was no longer going to happen, well, that's fine. We're well trained by you. Thank you very much. We will organize and we will continue the mission. The only time, and that's why we never had anything definitive, but this is right before Lefty leaves to work in Las Vegas for the Chicago outfit. And why wouldn't he take his prime bomber with him when he goes out there for Giancana? And it is completely inconsistent with anything Morales was doing at the time. He likely just said that he wouldn't do it because it's for pay. There is no overarching mission to this. It was kind of empty.
Then he finally gets a phone call at some point from Luis Posada, who has now been stationed in Venezuela for the CIA. And this is where the story for me gets where it's craziest. He goes from being Lefty Rosenthal's bomber in Miami to he shows up in Venezuela. A Cuban American who's never been to Venezuela, who doesn't have a Venezuelan passport or anything, and he is now the second in command of the Venezuelan secret police. Out of the blue. First of all, government process in Venezuela at the time didn't allow that to be happening. You had to have X amount of times as a citizen in the country. So Posada's working for the secret police there. He's a Cuban. My dad is working. He's a Cuban. He recruits
Orlando Garcia Vasquez.
Orlando Garcia
is in charge.
Vasquez is working for the CIA, and he's second in command of Venezuela. And my dad says in an interview that he gives to a Venezuelan reporter that he recruited Orlando Garcia to the CIA. So the entire Secret Service apparatus of Venezuela at the time is CIA Cubans. And the reason that they're there, there's multiple reasons, but the main reason that they're there is so that the CIA has an entry into the South America that they can get into and go into the other countries and do the things that they want to do. At the time, they were involved in Chile with the Pinochet government. They were involved in Bolivia, trying to, they were overthrowing all these countries. So Venezuela was the easiest way for them to get in because Venezuela was happy to let them do it. The only thing Venezuela wanted in return was the United States not to bother them with their neighbors. So Venezuela has been trying to steal Ghana for now, I don't know how long, because the oil reserves that Venezuela have are also the oil reserves that their neighbors right there have also. So that's one of the problems with Venezuela and their neighbors. So the Americans are looking at this. Back then, people don't even think about it. And at the time, that's when you hear that 60 Minutes story breaks not too long ago, where they were CIA smuggling cocaine into the United States. And they're smuggling it in through Venezuela, through aircraft with Barry Seal flying. But that's all coming in through Venezuela because the CIA controls. My dad's number one position with the Secret Service was airports. He controlled all the airports. So they had the run of all the airports. Things could come in and come out any way they wanted to. And then what happens is that at some point, the Cubans come up with a plan to blow up a Cuban airliner because that's the reason they're there. We'll help the CIA, but we're going to get something out of this eventually attacking Cuba somehow. So while they're there, the Mossad comes in because the Mossad comes in and trains my dad and others to go look for Nazis because you got to think about it. It's the 70s, late 70s, mid 70s. You've got Mengele still alive. He eventually drowned somewhere off South America. You've got all these families of Nazis that have descended over the years since they left Germany. The Bolivian cartel at that time was German run because the Germans had the money. The Bolivians didn't have any money. It was the Germans. So they would pay to do the process and smuggle it, and they were controlling everything. So that's why the Israelis came in with Mossad into Venezuela to help train them to help hunt for Nazis.
Klaus Barbie was like operating Ecuador as a secret as their intel guy, much like your dad. Like these were like guys moving around in
Uruguay, Paraguay, any why you say, Argentina, Bolivia, you name it, all that. But been flooded with the running Nazis that were running away for years. So, but while the Cubans are running all that and working all that, they still have Cuba on the mind. They can't kick that. So there's been a plan in the works to blow up what's left of the Cuban Air Force, which was they had 3 airplanes, 2 were down, 1 was left. It was an Air Canada DC-10, I believe, that they leased from the British government. So but they used that plane for everything, to ferry troops, to ferry arms, to ferry dignitaries, whatever. So it's a multi-use plane. It's not just a civilian airliner. So the plan is to blow, supposedly, the plane on the ground. There's no reason not to. Something goes haywire in the timing. We try to explain what happens, but the plane ends up being blown up in the air and everybody dies. And that just blows them all out of the water. They all either some get arrested, some don't. My dad doesn't. My dad comes back to the States because he's a CIA agent. He gives testimony. He has full immunity given to him by the government of the U.S. just to explain what he knew about the bombing, which we discuss in the book. So
76, right? It's
76.
Yeah,
76, 79. So that blows my dad's cover. So then my dad is burned with the CIA. He can no longer, they got no work for him. They don't want anything to do with him. The Cubans they did catch, they put him in jail. And so then my dad finds himself in Miami in 1977, 78, 79. No work, but skills. I got skills in the underworld. I got skills in connections. I got skills with, how to bring this in and how to get it out. And I got skills with weaponry. So he teams up with friends that he's always had that are in the business and goes to work for them to make money. But at the same time, always thinking, I can work with the cops once I get deep into this, and I can then turn it around for my benefit. I won't go to jail for any drug dealing, and I can be the savior, the one that wins, and eventually get out of here. Witness
Ricardo's overarching philosophy, which must be remembered throughout the book, is I don't play to win or lose, I play to stay in the game. That's a quote from him, and it's very much his credo.
Right. So he's done all this stuff. One of the interesting things is he met Lee Harvey Oswald. Says he knows. I mean, for a guy with a photographic memory, he would know. Yeah. But also kind of some missing time there around the Kennedy assassination, right?
Right. I mean, I was young. As I was growing up in Miami when I was like 6 years old, 7 years old. So I was born in 1963. So I was born 2 months before the JFK assassination. But by the time I was 4, 5, 6 years old, we would hear things about the Kennedy assassination and my father, connections. And then I would make friends. They would find out who I was, and then they were no longer my friends. And then I'd ask, why can't I come to your house anymore? And they'd say, well, your dad is connected with the JFK assassination, and we don't want any problems at our house. So that was something that always came up in my life, throughout my whole life. Even when I got to be in my teens, it was always, oh, we know your dad killed JFK, or we know your dad was involved, and whatnot. So my father had this, he would always take us hunting, and not hunting, shooting. He would always take us to practice, but he wouldn't say, hey, I'm picking you up next week or whatever, and we'll go hunt, we'll go shoot in the Everglades. He would just show up wherever I was, practice, shooting basketball, whatever. We would just turn around, there he'd be. He'd get in the car. So he would take us on these shooting trips out to the Everglades. And so on one trip, it was less than a year before he died. We were older. I was already 18 years old. We were out there shooting, and he said, ask any questions you want to ask. At this point in his life, he had left witness protection program voluntarily. He got tired of it. He had 3 contracts out on his life in Miami. They were all $1 million contracts on his head. And he was planning to change name, witness protection, and leave the country. So he was in the frame of mind, or he was going to get killed. He knew that was the other option. So he was in this frame of mind where he wanted to talk to us because they figured he was never going to see us again. So he said, you can ask me any questions that you've been wondering. And I didn't ask any questions. I just enjoyed the shooting. But my brother did ask if he had killed JFK because we heard it our whole lives. And his answer was, no, I didn't kill JFK, but I was in Dallas the day of the shooting. I had been sent there a couple of days earlier by my handler to just wait for instructions there with my team. And we said, what happened? He goes, nothing. We got a call later that day, said, go home. And we went home. So, okay. He goes, and we said, do you think Oswald killed him? He goes, there's no way that guy could have killed him. That guy couldn't shoot. Because when he got home from Dallas and they starts coming on in the paper and the TV and he sees the picture of the guy that they're showing as a shooter, he says that he recalls that guy being at a CIA training camp that he was sent to train snipers to help people get better at shooting. He didn't say where it was exactly or anything, The information was limited to, but that man couldn't shoot those shots. And I've gotten into that conversation with other people that say he was a Marine sniper and he was a marksman. Marine sniper and a Marine marksman shoots at a static target, and they grade you on cluster and timing and blah and that stuff. What my dad would take us to, the camp that he would take us to, had pulleys with moving targets that you had to put two rounds, and X amount of time. That's a sniper who would be able to pull off that shot. He said he could hit a static target. Anybody can hit a static target after a couple of rounds of practicing, but to hit a round that's a target that's moving away from you, getting smaller and smaller, for his ability, that from what he saw, that there's no way that person that he remembers as being him would never have didn't have the ability to pull off that shot. So that he thinks that there definitely was somebody else that actually, he said Oswald could have been there shooting. That doesn't mean that he shoots the shots that hit. So that's the scenario that he gave. But
this all syncs up and rhymes with all the people who were in Dallas that day. People
Right.
like your dad,
Right.
exactly. Operators, the other Morales, all these other guys, very skilled. And your dad, do you think your dad had a personal relationship with E. Howard Hunt and JM Wave? I mean, Operation 40 is a subset,
my dad
right?
was definitely in JM Wave. He knew all those people and has communications. I've talked to I forget the guy's name recently, but I've talked to people that were in that JM Wave, and they remember my dad and they talk about my dad. I've talked to all of them.
It was the biggest CIA outpost at that time
Yeah,
in Miami.
yeah.
It was literally
And it's
adjoining
like-
a university. I think it was the University of Miami, right?
It is, and you're not even allowed to have a CIA outpost on U.S. government land. That's against the CIA's mandate.
There you go.
It's supposed to be out of the country, not in the country.
But there's like really heavy duty, like CIA bigwigs moving out of JM Wave, not just Hunt.
Yeah. It doesn't take much to put, the hatred of the Cubans towards Kennedy for the Bay of Pigs, but then not only the Bay of Pigs, because the deal that the Americans make, which JFK makes with the Russians for the removal of the missiles from the missile crisis, is removing the missiles from Turkey that were obsolete missiles anyway. But there's a second part of that deal, which is not invading Cuba. There's a promise not to invade Cuba that he makes in that deal to remove the missiles from Cuba for the Russians. And every Cuban went, what? You're promising that you're not going to, what? That we can't even attack our Cuba from here, is what you're saying. So we're screwed. And all those Cubans were so mad.
So there's a lot of anger there, yeah. Ted Shackley, too, was the other guy.
Yeah.
Who's JM Wave. I think he ran JM Wave. I don't know.
There's no lack of volunteers for that mission at that point.
Right.
Do
you, one of the other interesting things that the anti-Castro Cuba, in addition to a lot of bombings, was the death of Letelier, because there were anti-Castro Cubans involved in that car bombing that took place in 1974 at Sheridan Circle. There's a really good book on it called Ghost of Sheridan Circle
There's another one called Labyrinth by Prosper, who was
Sounds familiar.
and Taylor Branch, the Pulitzer Prize winning author. Labyrinth, which documents that whole story, and my dad is in that book quite a bit also.
Interesting.
He was in the connection because he was working for the CIA with the Pinochet and the Letelier and the Allende, and they were trying to assassinate different people, and my dad was the one trying to tell them when to go assassinate somebody and who not to assassinate. So he was in the mix. It's in the Labyrinth book more than it is in ours, but there's stories about
the Letelier, yeah. That's the original 9/11 was what happened in.
My dad makes the quote in that book that would never have happened if he had been involved, because you don't murder women, you protect women, because Letelier had his mistress in the car with him when they blew it up and killed an innocent woman. And there's you get that. I have it in my dad's lawyer's notes that my dad made a statement to my dad's lawyer about it. saying we would never have done that because we don't kill women and children.
That rhymes exactly with Scarface. They must have got that story from the L'Atelier bombing.
I could sit here for an hour and a half and do Scarface from beginning to end and tell you what's going on.
And it's all anti-Castro Cuban stories then. Is that
it's all
what it is?
from daily newspaper archives from a year long. Because listen, my dad dies in 82. Scarface comes out in 83.
See, that makes sense.
They spent a year just covering Miami's news, listening to stories, going to the bars, watching the people, how they act, how they worked, and how they hung around with each other, and then just took those stories and made an arc of a story out of it.
That makes perfect sense.
They even throw Easter eggs in the movie. There's a scene where F. Murray Abraham is talking to a Chino early in the movie, and he says, "You little monkey." He calls him a monkey, like referring to my dad, because it's my dad's character who's that guy's portraying. So in the book Hotel Scarface, if you read it, Robin goes deeper into the connections. They even use the same type, like Carlos Quesada is one of the three guys that it's based around because he was the biggest drug dealer at the time. And one of the characters looks exact. They went and looked for a character that looked exactly like him to play his character. And then
the Robert Loggia.
And then the Tony Montana character is Traoreu, who is the guy who had the lions and he had all the animals, just like that guy did.
So they're not even that creative. They just borrowed it from nonfiction. Well, I never made that connection until now.
Oliver Stone.
That bombing scene was taken from Scarface. It's a L'Atelier.
Oliver Stone was told that he had to make the movie starring a Cuban, and in the newspaper, he refuses to, and he says in the newspaper, they wanted me to make the movie about a Cuban spy who blew up an airplane. That's the quote in the paper out of Oliver Stone's mouth. So they knew what they were doing. They just wanted to change it enough so that they didn't have to say this story is about these people, because it's exactly.
So if you know the history of the anti-Castro Cubans, Scarface is just a distillation for an hour and a half. Wow. Because there's all those themes, the Colombian, Cuban
Hotel
conflict.
Scarface, like I keep plugging Hotel Scarface because in that book, you'll see the deeper connections because he goes into it. But in all three books, if you're from Miami from those times and you read it and then you read the same stories, it's
obvious to you guys. It's obvious to me. It's not. Yeah, this is a really great book. I highly recommend this, guys. I've talked to Professor Alan McPherson. I'll repost that interview I did. It's at least 5 years ago. But the full title for audio is "Ghosts of Sheridan Circle: How a Washington Assassination Brought Pinochet's Terror State to Justice." So check that out. Really good book. And there was the only assassination that's taken place on American soil in D.C. was this guy who's like number 3 in the Allende government.
And there's a lot of connections in that story to JFK because there's a character called Raul the Cuban who appears in the JFK, MLK, and the Letelier assassination. In the book Labyrinth, they go into the character Raul the Cuban. The FBI even arrests somebody thinking that it's Raul the Cuban, and it's not. And then Gerald Posner in another book says that it's a different person in the Kennedy assassination. So there's 3 assassinations, 3 Raul the Cubans. And I'll give you a fact. My dad's father's name was Raul. My brother's name is Raul. And that's an alias that my dad would use, just goofing around.
Because wasn't the so-called killer of MLK? Didn't he run into a Raul in Canada?
Raul the Cuban. That name comes up in all 3 assassinations. Raul the Cuban, and in all 3, people say it's a totally different person. But at that time there was one Raul the Cuban running around. And I can't remember who it was, but from conversations with my brother that he had with my father, the last time I saw my brother, he told me, just find Raul the Cuban and you'll find all the answers. Nobody's ever proved to me who the actual.
These guys are super tight with CIA and intel people, and they knew all the trade tactics and
Yeah,
fake
oh, wow.
names.
At that
All
time,
that
my
stuff.
dad was deep CIA at that point,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
anything they wanted him to do.
Wow. Wow, great talk, guys. Do you have time for some questions or anything? There's a couple
Sure.
questions from the chat. Let's see.
course.
Yeah. Let's see. Gerald asked, William, could you please ask about the current situation in Cuba and how Rick thinks the crisis will play out? God bless the Cuban people. They're suffering terribly. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I thank you for that. I think eventually it looks like Trump will jump in and just take over the government. And then I don't know how it'll end up because the Cubans in Miami are thinking that they're the ones that are going to go back and rebuild and take over the island. And all these people that have been suffering on the island for all these years are the ones that deserve to be taken care of and improve their lives. So, but I think Trump will eventually go in at some point for some reason, distraction, or it needs to happen. And I'm not against it because I think it needed to happen many, 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 many years ago. Those people have suffered enough. I was born here, so I've never been to Cuba. I've never suffered that Cuban life. Just like many of the Cubans in Miami that stand there and yell, oh, it's communism and this is communism. They've never lived under communism. They were all born here in Miami like I was, most of them. They've lived a good life, and the people that are living on the island are the ones that need the help. So yes, go to Cuba, take over the government, but then install an international thing to oversee it. Europe, everybody gets to, not just the Americans taking over the island. That would be what then we would want as Cubans, I would think.
Do you think your views are consistent with other exiles and exile families, much like Marco Rubio or somebody like that?
No, because Marco Rubio's family came over before communism ever hit that place. His parents left for monetary gain while Batista was still president. So he has really no pain in his heart like the Cuban people that suffered in Cuba. He was long gone before Castro ever came to power. So he looks back at Cuba as something in the history books to him that doesn't really affect his heart. He doesn't suffer the pain. It's the ones that are there now that are suffering. We need to do something for them. And the last thing we need is the ones in Miami going back to try to take advantage of the situation and make money off the situation, which is what's going to happen. That's the way capitalism at its best right there.
It's an incredibly beautiful country. I know people who've traveled there. It's just like amazing, like really.
Yes. I want the government to fall, but I don't want it to become just a proxy state. It needs to be its own place. So that's going to be difficult.
They talked about it becoming a 51st state at one point, but it never materialized. Gerald also asked, does Rick believe there are still ex-Cuban caches out there in the Everglades? Like I've heard these stories, like around the time there was so much gun running and stuff like that.
I'm sure there is, just like there's drug caches out there that never got picked up on different trips because you couldn't get to them and you just leave them. So yeah, I'm sure you could out there something's buried. That the Everglades are so big and so much stuff out there that there's probably stuff out there.
Probably still out there from this time. A lot of that stuff went to Cuba. Like there's a lot of things going on. A lot of people, a lot of mobsters too. Lefty Rosenthal and some of those guys like, it wasn't David Ferry. David Ferry was involved in gun running, but it was the other two guys who were.
Yeah, my dad met his second wife through Cuban Power running guns back to Cuba. They would fill the trucks, the trunk up with guns, and she would drive them down to the boat, and the boat would take them out. So the moment they landed here, they were shipping the guns back. They were as fast as they could.
Yeah, Johnny Rosselli's around. So all these other kind of Italian mobsters too.
Yes. Yeah, because you have to get the gun somewhere. The army wasn't giving it to the Cubans because they knew they were planning on going back. So that's where the mafia connections. But you got to remember, these Cubans had mafia connections when they were in Cuba. The mafia ran the casinos in Cuba. Cuba was Miami. Havana was Miami. It was all American, all CIA, all American run. The plantations were owned by the Americans, everything. So those CIA connections, as soon as everybody left Cuba, they just said, all right, now we're going to give you stuff to send back so we can go fight a war. The CIA was gung-ho. It was just the government of the United States didn't want to go for the full ride because they got scared of the Russian missiles. Plain and simple is all it is. He left them out. He hung them out to dry, and And
Yeah, it's an incredible story. I mean, I'm glad you guys wrote this book and took time to memorialize this, because he's an important aspect of the exiles and the Cuban story too, and the Cuban diaspora is
no, and the Venezuelan story, because people think that, well, how did Hugo Chavez and those people come into power? Because the United States destroyed the governments of Venezuela at the time, and stole their assets and stole their oil, and ran their country through the CIA, and put down rebellions and helped them stop these people. And they wanted the dirty politician, because then they could pay the dirty politicians. So the rise of Hugo Chavez and then Maduro after him are because of the policies that the United States had in place in the 70s in Venezuela, using it as a drug hub to send drugs to the United States. Then it falls to the communists, because the democracy that they have is worthless because we're stealing everything. So there's no point. And then they collapse. They turn into a communist country, or dictatorship is really what it is. And now we're dealing with that problem, and we created the problem. So it's hard. We're in this vicious circle and a catch-22 of screwing ourselves over. We got to get out of that. So,
yeah, great job, guys. Great job on the talk and the book. Is there anything you'd like to add, or anything I missed? We're at the hour mark. Is there anything else you guys like to add or finish up with?
I appreciate everybody's support, and I thank you for having me on the show. And I hope everybody enjoys the book. And I do want everybody to know the book's not just about my dad only, because there's a lot of family life in there. We didn't have time to delve into it. But when you see the word dad also as one of the characteristics, it also is I tried to show the effects of a father like this and the life that he led, how it affects the family also, because we're victims of his life, not only the ones that he killed or destroyed or whatever he did for the government, but along the way, it shows you that there's two sides that are all suffering at the same time. So,
yeah, it's an important point. It's a human story. Like there are families and daughters and children and nieces and relatives and all this stuff. Is there anything you'd like to add, Sean?
No, just if you want to learn more about the story, monkeymorales.com is there. And stay tuned. There's more coming about Monkey, hopefully, in the months and
we can say we've signed an option, right? We have signed an option to develop it into either movie or TV. We don't know its direction. We're very early in the option. So, but hopefully this time we score.
Yeah, good luck. I wish you the best. It's just a great history. I mean, it's a great personal story, a story of history. You can see it here. You can order the stuff, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Target. So you can get it through the website. I'll put a link to the website here. It's also on Amazon. You can get a Kindle, audiobook, paperback, audio CD. Is the best, if anybody has any follow-up questions or wants to reach out and contact you, is the best way through the website?
Yeah, I mean, we're on socials also.
I'm on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. So if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Rick714Canes. And I'm easy to
Miami
find.
Hurricanes.
Ricardo Morales. It's not Ricardo Morales Jr. You'll find me on
Ricardo Morales Jr. Just type
and SeanOliverBooks.com. You can hit me through the website.
Sean Oliver. Okay. I'll put links to all that in the show notes.
Appreciate it.
There's a lot more in this book, guys, a lot more details. It's a personal biography, but it also reads as a history book. And like Sean mentioned earlier, there's a lot of footnotes. So it's very important when these things get footnoted so people can find the references and expand their research. But again, full title of the book we talked about today is Monkey Morales, The True Story of a Mythic Cuban Exile, Assassin, CIA Operative, FBI Informant, Smuggler, and Dad. And the authors are Sean Oliver and his son, Ricardo Morales Jr. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, William.
All right. Stay there, guys. Stay there.